My name is Paige Bennett. I am 35 years old. 4 years ago, I discovered my husband had been secretly burying our vacation rental business under massive debt while I helped build it unpaid for years. Now I sat in the mediation room at the Myrtle Beach law office as he demanded I sign over the beach house, the cars, and the company without hesitation after 12 years together. Our 15-year-old son waited in the hallway unaware. But I had kept my secret safe, and I was ready to hand him the victory he thought he deserved, knowing it would be his undoing. If you have ever felt completely erased by someone you trusted with your whole life, drop a comment below with where you are watching from and tell me what time it is there, because I read every single one. The air in that mediation room felt thick enough to choke on. My husband leaned back in his chair with that same self-satisfied expression I had seen across the breakfast table for 12 years. He slid the stack of papers toward me like he was doing me a favor. "Just sign it, Paige, and we can both move on," he said, his voice smooth as if this was any ordinary Tuesday. "I want the house, the rentals, the vehicles, everything. You can keep our son." He said it so casually, like our son was an old piece of furniture he was generously leaving behind. My lawyer, Chloe Scott, sat beside me, her pen tapping quietly against her notepad. She had reviewed every line I had prepared in secret for years. Across the table, my husband's lawyer, Kevin Foster, cleared his throat, but my husband waved him off before he could speak. "No need for any audits or delays," my husband added with a sharp edge. "I built this business from nothing. She knows that." I kept my face calm even though my stomach twisted. For 4 years, I had watched him dig the hole deeper while I smiled at client dinners and handled every late-night booking for the vacation properties. I had traced the loans, the maxed credit lines, the back taxes, the vendor debts, the secret personal expenses. The beach house we lived in carried $1,800,000 in mortgages against a market value of only $1,200,000. The company itself owed nearly $700,000 in combined obligations. We were hundreds of thousands underwater, and he had no idea I knew. My best friend had been texting me all morning with fake concern. I had figured out months earlier that she had been feeding him information about my plans for over a year. Little things she let slip always reached him first. She had been carrying a quiet torch for him since our early days in Myrtle Beach, and he had used it perfectly. My mother-in-law had already called the night before. "You need to be reasonable, dear," she had said, her tone dripping with that practiced sympathy she reserved for moments like this. "Men have needs, and you have been so focused on the business details. Let him have what he built." I signed the main agreement slowly, deliberately. I relinquished all claims to the marital assets in exchange for a modest cash settlement of $65,000 in my personal belongings. The addendum was attached, the one that listed every single liability in clear black and white. My husband barely glanced at it before scrawling his name. Kevin Foster tried once more to speak, but my husband cut him off again. "We are done here. I want this finished today." Chloe Scott met my eyes for a brief second. She knew the plan. She knew what was coming. The next few weeks became a master class in quiet endurance. My husband moved me to the guest room in the beach house we had shared for over a decade. He started bringing his new girlfriend around the very next weekend. She was 30 years old and worked part-time at one of the rental properties. She walked into my kitchen like it already belonged to her, wearing my favorite apron while blending smoothies and laughing at his jokes. My husband put his arm around her right in front of me, as if I had already faded into the wallpaper. Our son watched it all with quiet confusion. He was 15 and caught between us. My husband had begun the slow work of turning him against me. "Your mom is making this harder than it has to be," I overheard him say one evening when they thought I was still at my part-time job coordinating social media for a local real estate group. "I just want everyone to be happy, but she keeps dragging her feet." Our son started pulling away from me and in small ways. He spent more time in his room. He answered my questions with one-word replies. The poison was working, and it hurt more than any of the public humiliations. My coworker, Samantha Keller, noticed the change at the office. She had become a quiet support over the last year. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the ocean, Paige," she said one afternoon as we reviewed campaign posts. "If you need to talk or even just step out for coffee, I am here." I thanked her, but I kept my secrets close. I could not risk anything reaching my husband. Dr. Mark Whitaker, my financial counselor from the trust I had set up years earlier, called me the following week. "Everything remains protected in the irrevocable account for your son," he confirmed quietly. $630,000 untouched and untouchable by anyone, including you or your husband. It is exactly where it needs to be. I felt a small measure of relief, but it was cold comfort while I watched my life being dismantled piece by piece. The small violations kept coming. My husband canceled my personal credit card first, then he suggested I should probably find somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. My mother-in-law arrived the next day to help me pack. She went through my closet and decided what I deserved to keep and what counted as marital assets. She packed my things in trash bags, not boxes. "It is only fair," she said when I stood there watching. My husband nodded from the doorway without a word of protest. My best friend kept calling, pretending to be the supportive friend. I heard things are getting tough. "Your husband mentioned you are not fighting the settlement at all. Smart move, honestly." Her voice had that fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. I played along just enough to keep the information flowing in the direction I needed. Our son came to me one night in the guest room. He looked older than his 15 years. "Mom, is Dad really okay financially?" he asked. He bought his girlfriend a new watch, but then said we could not afford my soccer camp this summer. I squeezed his hand and told him to trust me just a little longer. I could see the doubt in his eyes, but I also saw the beginning of understanding. The mediation sessions dragged on with repeated small demands. My husband wanted the full business valuation ignored. He wanted me to waive any claim to future rental income. Each time he pushed, Chloe Scott pushed back just enough to keep the documents airtight without tipping him off. Kevin Foster looked increasingly uncomfortable, but my husband shut down every suggestion of a full review. One evening, my husband brought his girlfriend to the house for a dinner party with several rental clients. My mother-in-law was there too, playing the perfect hostess. They laughed and toasted to new beginnings, while I cleared plates like hired help. Samantha Keller had come over earlier that day to drop off some work files and had seen the setup. "You do not have to put up with this forever," she had whispered before leaving. Her words stayed with me like a small lifeline. The final hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. I lay awake the night before, staring at the ceiling of the guest room, listening to the ocean waves outside. My husband was in our old bedroom with his girlfriend. I had documented everything for 4 years. The trust for our son was ironclad. The liability disclosure was buried in the agreement he had already signed. I had played the defeated wife perfectly. The next morning, the sunlight felt too bright as I prepared for the final hearing. I chose a simple navy dress that made me look every bit the defeated wife everyone expected. Chloe Scott met me at the courthouse steps and gave me a quiet, reassuring look. Everything we had prepared for 4 years was about to unfold. Inside the courtroom, my husband sat already looking victorious. He had brought my mother-in-law with him. His girlfriend waited outside the doors. The judge, Rachel Torres, called the case. The proceedings moved quickly at first. My husband's lawyer, Kevin Foster, confirmed the asset transfer. Chloe confirmed my acceptance of the modest settlement of $65,000. The judge asked me directly if I was entering the agreement voluntarily. I answered softly that I just wanted my husband to have everything he had asked for and to move on for our son's sake. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, but accepted my words. The documents were passed around page after page. My husband signed quickly, barely glancing at them, his pen moving with impatience. I signed each line with deliberate care, savoring the moment in silence. Then Kevin Foster reached the liability disclosure addendum. His face changed as he read the detailed list of debts. He leaned in and whispered urgently to my husband. The change in my husband's face was immediate and shocking. He went from smug confidence to sudden fury mixed with disbelief. He stood up abruptly. "This is fraud," he declared loudly. "She has been planning this." His voice echoed in the courtroom. Then just as suddenly he turned toward me with a desperate bargaining tone I had never heard from him. "Paige, we can still work this out?" He set his eyes wide. "We can tear up the papers and find a better way. I will even let you keep more if you help fix this mess." The raw panic and the shocking shift from arrogance to pleading in front of everyone left the room silent. Judge Rachel Torres remained unmoved. She reminded him that he had refused the recommended financial audit and had signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. "The agreement stands," she ruled firmly. The gavel came down. Our 12-year marriage was officially dissolved. I had given him exactly what he demanded: the beach house, the vacation rental business, the vehicles, and all the hidden obligations that came with them. In the hallway afterward, my husband followed me, his face still flushed. "You think you played this perfectly," he hissed, his words sharp with resentment. "But you will be the one who ends up with nothing and no one. You have always been the practical one, but this time you went too far." My mother-in-law stood beside him, nodding vigorously and adding that I had never appreciated what her son had provided. His girlfriend, who had heard the raised voices through the doors, looked at him with new doubt in her eyes and quickly made an excuse to leave. My best friend had somehow learned about the hearing and was waiting outside, sending messages I later learned were updates to my husband even then. Our son had been waiting in the hallway. He looked at me with confusion and hurt in his 15-year-old eyes. "Mom, what happened in there?" he asked quietly. "Dad said you tricked him." The conversation left me with a knot in my stomach as I tried to explain without revealing too much too soon. The poison my husband had dripped into his ears over the months was taking hold. 2 weeks after the hearing, I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment a few blocks from the beach, using part of the $65,000 settlement for the security deposit and basic furniture. The beach house that had once been our home was now my husband's problem, as the mortgage payments and creditor calls began flooding in. Samantha Keller, my coworker at the real estate marketing job, brought over a housewarming plant and offered to help unpack, but I could tell she sensed the loneliness radiating from me. Dr. Mark Whitaker called to confirm that the irrevocable trust for my son remained completely protected with $630,000 safely set aside for his future, but even that victory felt hollow in the quiet evenings. 3 months later, my husband showed up unannounced at my apartment door one rainy afternoon. His face was thinner, and his usual confident posture had slipped into something raw and unsteady. He launched straight into a desperate attempt to rewrite everything we had built together, claiming that the debts had only spiraled because of market changes no one could have predicted, and that I had always been the one who understood the numbers better than anyone. His words came fast, almost pleading, as if saying them out loud might force me to step back into my old role and fix it for him. I stood in the doorway listening without inviting him inside, and the shock of hearing him admit the financial mess while still trying to shift some blame onto invisible outside forces left me momentarily speechless. I told him calmly that the decisions were his to live with now, and that I was done carrying the weight. He reacted with a sudden defensive outburst right there on the landing, raising his voice just enough for my neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Torres, to crack her door and peer out. He noticed her watching and lowered his tone, but the frustration in his eyes burned hotter. Later that same evening, he sent a string of text messages alternating between accusations that I had hidden the truth for years and quiet admissions that he missed the way I had kept everything running smoothly. The shift from public bluster to private bargaining felt like another layer of the man I thought I knew peeling away, and it only reinforced how alone I truly was in this new chapter. Our son came by the following weekend carrying a small duffel bag with some clothes and school books. He had turned 16 the month before, and the distance between us had grown into something heavier than teenage moodiness. He sat at my tiny kitchen table and asked outright why I'd not fought harder for more in the settlement. When I explained that the choice had been about securing his future through the protected trust, he listened, but his expression stayed guarded. He said his father had been calling the apartment late at night venting about creditors and asking our son to talk to me on his behalf. The conversation ended with my son hugging me briefly before leaving early, claiming he had plans with friends. I closed the door behind him and stood in the empty living room, realizing that even the one relationship I had tried hardest to shield was now marked by the same quiet fracture. My best friend never reached out again after the hearing. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had started spending more time with my mother-in-law, as if the two of them had formed their own quiet alliance once the dust settled. The realization that 20 years of friendship could dissolve so completely without a single real conversation stung. But I did not call her. I had set the boundary the moment I stopped responding to her fake concern texts, and sticking to it meant accepting the silence that followed. My mother-in-law sent one last message 3 months after the divorce was finalized. It was short and laced with the same practiced superiority she had always used on me. She wrote that my husband was facing real consequences now, and that a real partner would have stepped in to help instead of walking away. I read the words twice, then deleted the text without replying. The decision felt final and necessary, yet it also sealed the last door to the extended family I had been part of for over a decade. I blocked her number that same evening, and the quiet that followed was both a relief and a reminder of how small my world had become. Evenings in the apartment stretched long. I would sit with a cup of tea after work, reviewing social media campaigns for the agency or sketching simple design ideas for a side project I had started just to fill the hours. The work kept my hands busy, but the loneliness settled in my chest like a constant low hum. I had protected my son's financial future and my own separate savings, but in doing so, I had cut ties with the people who once filled my days with noise and obligation. My husband's business continued its slow unraveling, with vendors filing claims and the beach house listing sitting unsold on the market because of the underwater mortgages. I heard occasional updates from Samantha, who still interacted with some of the old clients, but I never asked for details. Knowing the outcome without living inside it anymore felt like the final boundary I had drawn around myself. One quiet Saturday, I ran into Mrs. Evelyn Torres in the hallway as she watered her potted plants. She had become a casual acquaintance after that day my husband raised his voice outside my door. She asked how I was settling in, and I gave her the polite answer that everything was fine. Her kind smile made the isolation feel sharper for a moment, because even a neighbor's small concern highlighted how little deeper connection I allowed myself anymore. I thanked her and retreated back inside, closing the door softly behind me. I enrolled in an online interior design course a few weeks later, using part of the settlement money for the fees. The classes gave structure to my weeks, and the instructors praised my eye for practical layouts, but I completed the assignments in the silence of my apartment with no one to share the small victories with. Our son's visits grew less frequent as he focused on his final year of high school and his father's ongoing struggles. Ice. We texted about everyday things, but the easy warmth we once shared had been replaced by careful politeness. I told myself this was the necessary cost of the choices I had made 4 years earlier when I first discovered the debts and decided to wait instead of confronting them. The boundaries I had drawn kept me safe from being pulled back into the chaos, but they also left me standing on my own with no one left to lean on. I had handed my husband exactly what he demanded, and in return I received the freedom to rebuild on my own terms. That freedom came wrapped in an emptiness I had not fully anticipated. Some nights I would sit by the window listening to the distant waves and wonder if the price of protecting myself had been higher than I realized. Yet every time the doubt crept in, I remembered the mediation room, the courtroom, and the years of quiet preparation that had led me here. I had chosen self-preservation, and the loneliness that came with it was the reality I now lived with every single day. Thank you for listening to my story. It still feels heavy to say out loud, but setting those final boundaries showed me that sometimes protecting your peace means accepting the quiet that follows. If you have ever walked away from a relationship knowing it was the right choice, but still felt the weight of the emptiness that came after, drop a comment and tell me how you move forward, because I read every single one and your experiences help more than you know.